I've no time for him. I mean, he's got this sort of loud, rather pompous voice, and he says premise 1, deduction 2, and things like that, and the audience, I suppose, is supposed to be impressed.
Oh my gosh, William Lane Craig is 100% one of those car salesman sounding dudes. I could see someone saying it's pompous.
I just no desire to I don't respect him. I find his manner pompous, and I just don't want to be in the same room as him, really.
Christianity is an Evil Religion, Part 3. This is going to be an interesting final run stretch here, if you will, with Richard Dawkins and Alex O'Connor. We've watched him lead up to this, but I really want to see the rest of this deep dive. Two great minds. Curious to see how they react toward the end of this with the idea that Christianity is an evil religion. Let's continue. Oh, and by the way, thank you so much for all the people joining the community, subscribing. It means the world to see you all here and making this show grow. More people seeing reactions, having fun, letting loose, but also nothing to fear, nothing to worry about. Let's dive in and pick apart some of these well-known videos that we see and also get a laugh at the same time. So be sure to subscribe and check the bell.
I think the Oxford Union has especially descended into a time when there's a lot, what wasn't quite so bad, the debate that you were in a few weeks ago, but I've seen it in the past where people are constantly popping up with so-called points of information.
Yes.
Or points of order. Then they're never either points of information or very, very seldom points of information. They're points of opinion. I think it's probably right. The points of information is right. On a point of information, Mr. President, the Speaker's got his figures wrong. The number of people,
yes,
killed in the Holocaust for so-and-so and so-and-so rather than what he said. That's a point of information.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, people might not be aware in these formal debates. It's in the rule book. You're allowed to interrupt a speaker. If you're ever watching a debate speech at the Oxford Union and someone from the audience just sort of stands up and starts talking, it's because you're allowed to do that. And you say point of information. And as you say, the idea is that it's supposed to be exactly that, a point of information.
Yes.
But somebody ends up just sort of giving a mini speech themselves.
Yes, well, the president, no doubt when it was first started, the president would have been onto that. But the custom has grown up that points of information are just ways of interrupting somebody's speech.
Yes,
with your own speech.
And now that you can get away with it, like that's what people do. And why not do that if everybody's just getting away with it?
Yes.
I think I POI'd the cardinal at one point because he was talking about Cardinal Turkson, a man who I'm told is in the running to become the next pope.
Yes.
Was giving a speech and was talking about the Vatican's contribution to science and how they set up the first scientific academy with members including Galileo.
Yes.
And my point of information was to simply ask, what then happened to that Galileo?
Yes.
And it was funny because it seemed like he didn't understand that I was trying to sort of make a point because he just answered it just completely flatly, just said, oh, well, he was not a member anymore afterwards. And then he became a member again, just answered it very straight up. And then I feel like the point might have been lost. But that's what a point of information is supposed to be for.
Yes,
right? And these debates, they leave too much room for rhetoric. They leave too much room for...
That's why I hate debates. As far as my interest is concerned, because I'd rather have a dialogue, a deep dialogue to understanding where we're coming from. And they can get like debates, but not the same kind of rhetorical game, haha, gotcha bullshit that you usually see. It's more like, now you know why I'm coming from where I'm coming from, and now you know why you're coming from where you're coming from, for the viewer.
You're so aware that you're on display that I don't know, it's not very conducive to open conversation of the kind that we're having now.
I used to attend the union every week when I was an undergraduate, and I enjoyed it very much. I must say, I enjoyed the rhetoric and I enjoy the sort of things that I'm not so keen on. And I suppose I am actually a life member, but I'm not. I think I've lost my card. I'm not sure they let me in now.
I'm sure they'll let you in. I wonder. If you were invited, I mean, there are some wonderful classic debates that you've done with people like John Lennox. I wonder if you were invited to do something like that today. Is it something you'd still be interested in doing? I'm talking about the formal debate, audience, 10-minute opening statement, cross-examination, does God exist?
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I mean, I would like to have a discussion with, as I have with the Archbishop of Canterbury, for example, and I find I've had actually, I think, 2 or 3 discussions with him, and they've been very civilized and enjoyable, and I think an honest attempt at dialogue. I don't think I'd like to do it in the debate format. I did agree to do a debate in the Cambridge Union in which Rowan Williams was one of the speakers, and that was sort of not too bad. But no, I wouldn't have. I wouldn't be falling over myself to have a debate on that subject.
Who's the most formidable debate opponent that you have had in your career that you can think of now on this question of God's existence?
I don't think there are any. Not that I'm formidable myself, but I don't think there are any very good arguments.
No point in a debate where you're sat there getting ready to get up and give your 10-minute rebuttal while they're speaking, writing your notes and thinking, oh gosh, what am I going to say to that? That's a fair point.
I don't think so.
I mean, this guy is definitely funny. And Alex is laughing. He hasn't had a debate opponent that's got him with an aha moment,
I mean, I don't want to sound arrogant. It's not that I've got great points. It's just that I don't think there are any good points to be made.
And maybe it's something about the debate format as well. Everybody's so prepared that
Yes.
You're rarely caught off guard.
Yes. I mean, the sort of professional debaters on behalf of religion, people like William Craig.
He's the first name that drops because there's no one who does it his way. But again, you really have to watch him. He's pulling up sneaky quotes. He's not actually engaging the material often with a absolute fact. Like, he's not being as honest with what the material's actually saying. He's using it as a gotcha to try and win an argument for the audience to go, aha, greatest debater of all time. He's a debater.
I have no time for him. I mean, he's got this sort of loud, rather pompous voice, and he says as a premise 1, deduction 2, and things like that, and the audience, I suppose, is supposed to be impressed.
Oh my gosh, William Lane Craig is 100% one of those car salesman sounding dudes. I could see someone saying it's pompous. Definitely braggadocious, if you will.
I've had William Lane Craig twice on my podcast, and I always had a good experience with him. Having said that, I didn't debate him. I don't know what that would be like. It's something you're not interested in doing, debating William Lane Craig? Or having a conversation perhaps with William Lane Craig?
I have done. I've vowed not to. I feel such contempt for him because of his. I don't know whether you've seen what he says about the Israelites slaughtering the Midianites, and instead of saying what any decent theologian would say, well, it never happened, and this is just an Old Testament story. He says, well, the Midianites had it coming because they were so sinful, and then
Wow.
If you worry about the Midianite children who had their brains beaten out of them, that's okay because they went straight to heaven, and that finished him off as far as I was concerned.
Now,
William Lane Craig has to justify God's behavior, his commands, the righteous people performing genocide in the Old Testament. And in the process of doing that, he says some of the most inhumane things, and it's scary. It reminds me of the mother who drowns her 4 kids. God told her to, and that they were going to go to heaven for it. And then, we would look at that person batshit crazy. We would realize there's something mentally off. This is not an okay person. there's voices in their head, or they believe they're hearing from God or whatever, we would diagnose that. And I like what he said here, that any decent theologian would recognize historically this is extremely questionable that it even happened at all. But if it did, they would realize this is some bad stuff. They're not going to justify and find out a way to make excuses. Well, they went to heaven because they were kids. What about the grown-up women who didn't have control in that society? I mean, what about them? Did they just innocently go to heaven too? I mean, like, you can find all sorts of problems with this kind of thinking.
For me, I actually wrote a piece in the Guardian saying, I will never have anything to do with him.
I can see why you might sort of look at something like that and say, that's an evil thing to think. That's an evil thing to say. I don't want to debate this person. A few moments ago, you told me that the idea of the New Testament in general about, being born in sin and needing salvation is an evil idea.
Yes.
And yet, that's an idea that many of the opponents that you have spoken to will have believed. They believe evil things too. So why particularly with William Lane Craig?
It's a fair point. I think the thing is that the Christian theologians who take this seriously are honestly well-meaning. I mean, they believe in the God of love. They believe in Jesus as the Son of God of love, and so on. I think the sheer they would never have defended the slaughter of the Midianites and the Jebusites and things in the book of Joshua as somehow justified because the Midianites were sinful. I think it's an order of magnitude worse there. Perhaps you would disagree with that.
Maybe. I mean, I think there's a sense in which a Christian who believes in the historicity of the Old Testament, I mean, the Midianites might be, I'm sometimes told it's complicated by the fact that it's Moses who instructs the slaughter of the Midianites, but it seems clear to me that this is sanctioned by God. I think that a Christian who believes in the historicity of the Old Testament just has to believe that whatever happened there was somehow okay with God, was somehow moral. Now, I agree that to me is a criticism I make all the time. How could this be moral? But I also say, how could it be moral that God allows children to get cancer? How could it be moral that,
yes.
God, and I suppose the thing that I would say is that if you pressed a Christian, well, if there's a good God, why do children get cancer? They just have to say something like, there must be some reason for this. There must be some explanation.
Yes, I suppose that if they really do if they really do believe the literal word of the Bible, but then that brings us back to fundamentalist creationists. I mean,
even just in terms of why God would allow evil at all. What I'm imagining, in other words, is suppose we had this other Christian philosopher debater, and somebody had said to them, well, why do children get cancer if there's a good God? And they said, look, if I believe in a good God, I have to believe that the children who die of cancer are going to heaven. I have to believe that there's some reason for the suffering that they're undergoing.
Yes.
Now, you could say, this person said that, kids who have cancer, they should be grateful because they're going straight to heaven, and there's some reason to give children cancer. That's despicable. I want nothing to do with this person. I'll never debate them. However, I would suppose that basically everybody that you've debated on the topic of Christianity would say something like that about cancer in children. Would. And so I wonder why with William Lane Craig it's a particular problem.
You make a good point. I suppose none of these sophisticated theologians take the literal word of the Old Testament seriously. I mean, they don't believe in Adam and Eve, for example. They don't believe in therefore, why would you believe that the story of the Midianites is history? Why not just sort of say, well, this is some kind of tribal myth, and all sorts of tribes have these horrible.
Well, I can keep up this God's advocate, if you like. I would say, in other words, I would answer that question with a Christian hat on by saying that the Bible is a collection of books rather than a book, and that book contains different genres. And that the genre of Genesis is something like poetry.
Exactly.
The genre of Numbers seems much more to be, at least intended to be, history, in a way that the genre of Paul is is letters, it's epistles.
Yes.
Whether or not you think he actually even existed, I mean, I think Paul existed, just to be clear, but it doesn't really matter. It's still clear that if you think that it's true, the kind of thing that Paul's doing is writing letters, the kind of thing that Acts is doing is essentially, biography or history, is attempting to do that.
I feel like maybe if Alex were to ask him, is it just because of how Craig carries himself, communicates himself? Because these other guys have ways in which they'll excuse horrific evils on behalf of God or their worldview or the Bible or whatever, even if it's not this Midianite or this particular Joshua's conquest motif. Would you just say it's something he mentions how he was pompous? There's a sense in which an arrogance does come from Craig. Is that what really pushes you off? Because I know that the Christian side will just view this as a defeat and that he's shamelessly afraid. Well, he's not going to say that, but he's afraid of debating Craig, William Lane Craig. And it may just be, dude, this guy's so arrogant and carries himself in such a way that he just has no interest in debating this kind of person. The way that they are, he just doesn't like it. He's not a fan of them. I don't know. It's almost like some atheists who just have zero interest in debating some of the more precept type of Christians that are arrogant and really, really rude or obnoxious. Now, Craig doesn't carry that rude obnoxious that a precept does, but he does have this arrogance of, I know better, and will cherry pick and like do a lot of tricks in debating that are not, respectable. When he debated Robert and Price answered his point, but unless he spends 3 minutes emphasizing and saying it 45 times, Craig could just throw up in his rebuttal and go, well, you never dealt with my argument here. And he's like, actually, I did. And, there's things where that happens in debates. And it's unfortunate that this is the conclusion that, Craig gets his kind of perception from those, which I would love to see a debate and engagement between two completely different kinds of minds. One a philosopher, one a scientist, right? A biologist, someone who really deals with facts and data and not, mind games and mental masturbation often.
It seems to me that where Numbers is very obviously trying to just recount historical events, Genesis seems a lot more allegorical to me. And so it doesn't seem inconsistent for me to say, well, of course I don't believe in Adam and Eve. I don't believe in the 7-day creation. But I do believe that there was a real slaughter of the Midianites by Moses and his armies.
Well, yes. And then, I mean, I don't think you should then go ahead to justify it, but by
quite right, yeah.
They were sinful. I mean, I should have thought that the right and proper thing for a Christian to say is the slaughter of the Midianites is no more factual history than the story of Jupiter or Apollo, Thor with his hammer and things. These are tribal myths.
It's wild that he comes from a world where Christians around him believed that. I'm in America, ladies and gentlemen. We believe this shit jot and tittle. We think this happened jot and tittle. That's why I've been on a warpath for 7 years with MythVision, unraveling fundamentalism, showing why the literal belief in the Bible does not work. How much mythology is there? The name of my channel, MythVision, was me paying attention to the myth with my vision in the Bible. And so it's just interesting that he comes from a different world of Christians who've already accepted these non-fundamentalist, literalist approaches, which is a healthier version of Christianity all day long. But we believed this stuff, and we're in a pretty... I think we're in a pretty bad place right now as far as like America is concerned with people who actually buy this stuff literally. I'm doing everything I can, and I know many others are trying theirs as well, but it's let's hope things get better and people educate themselves. Which
we can study as mythology, but why go out of your way to make it sound much more evil than it really is? By saying, well, the Midianites were sinful and their children were going to heaven. Anyway, it's somehow, I just find it more appalling. Perhaps I'm wrong, but I find it sort of appalling that you take it so seriously, that you actually, well, you take the belief in the historicity of it so seriously that you even defend it rather than just say, as any decent bishop would say, well, that's never happened.
Okay, it's interesting. Yeah, I don't know how to take his answer here other than if you really do believe, like I did at one point, that this happened, and you see the quotes back here in Genesis where it talks about, I'm going to take your people to Egypt. I'm going to make you slaves in Egypt. And of course, after hundreds of years, 400 years, I'm going to free you while their sin fills up over here in Canaan so that you can go and, slaughter the Midianites, Canaanites, all the ites, Jebusites, all the different groups, right? When you believe that happened, when you think this is history, you believe it, you're kind of stuck with having to explain why children. Why virgins? Why this, right? And the best excuse Craig could come up with is, well, they're going to heaven anyways. And before they're of conscious age of knowing to do real evil and that could possibly cause them to go to hell, because he believes that too, they're going to go to heaven. That's why he's forced into that, which tells you another reason why, title of this video that they made, Christianity is an Evil Religion. You see how you have to try and make sense to justify these kinds of things. Even in this case, it's like, damn, whose shoe are you wearing? What if you were one of the Midianite families or Canaanite families? Would you look at this tribe coming in and go, yep, they're righteous? And of course, people have done these thought experiments with William Lane Craig, and like, it never, there's no getting through because they're believers. They have a strong foundation, maybe another evil of the religion.
I think that as particularly at the height of the new atheism and religion debates that were happening in the sort of late 2000s, I think a lot of people were disappointed that the forerunner of the atheist side, Richard Dawkins, and arguably the forerunner of the Christian side, William Lane Craig, never came together to have that debate. Because even if you do think that what he believes there is particularly and specifically evil, I suppose everything you've just said to me, people would probably just like to see you say that to William Lane Craig.
I wrote an article in The Guardian saying it, and I did in fact have a debate with him in Mexico, I forget when.
With the boxing ring?
Yeah.
Yes.
I just no desire to I don't respect him. I find his manner pompous, and I just don't want to be in the same room as him, really.
Well, in the interest of diplomacy, I will offer no further comment, except that that's certainly not my experience with the man. But
okay,
I imagine that we've had very different interactions with him in the past. Let's put it that way. Well, on this topic of debates and arguments for God's existence, anyway, I suppose what I wanted to do was ask you about two arguments that I've been thinking about related to God's existence, but specifically related to evolution and naturalism as well, because I think that these are questions which I'm sure you've commented on before somewhere, but I guess I'd like to probe again.
Yeah.
One of these is Lewis's argument from desire, which sounds like a very silly argument on the face of it. He essentially says something along the lines of, look, everybody seems to have an innate desire for something a bit beyond the natural, something a bit supernatural, something, beauty, purpose, this kind of intangible stuff. And he said, I actually wrote down the way he puts it in Mere Christianity. He says most people, if they had really learned to look into their own hearts, would know that they do want, and want acutely, something that cannot be had in this world. There are all sorts of things in this world that offer to give it to them, that offer to give it to you, but never quite keep their promise. And then later, if I find in myself a desire which no experience in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is that I was made for another world. And like I say, on the face of it, that sounds maybe a little bit silly, but there is a serious question in here that most of the time when we evolve a desire for something, we evolve a desire for food, for warmth, this kind of thing. The reason for that is because this desire gives us reason to seek out those things in the real world. If there were no food and digestion, if there were no temperature, it would make no sense for us to evolve a desire for food, for temperature, for warmth. That wouldn't make any sense. Why would that even evolve in the first place if it doesn't actually latch on to anything in the real world? And although I'm not sure if Lewis was aware of this. We know anthropologically that almost everywhere we look in the world, we find people with religious sensibilities. They have some kind of either desire or apprehension of something beyond themselves, something divine. And I suppose the question Lewis asks is, from an evolutionary perspective, why would it be that we would universally evolve that desire if that desire doesn't actually latch onto anything in reality?
Great question. The way I'm understanding this is asking this of Dawkins. It's like, what is the real world things that cause that desire? I don't know. I'd like to see how Dawkins answers this question from Alex.
I find it a very odd argument. Because we have a desire to survive and live, which makes perfect evolutionary sense, it's a natural projection of that desire that we might desire to go on living after we die, with a desire for eternal life. You know, you could easily see that as just an extension of the perfectly Darwinian desire to go on living. I think it's just another example of that. That particular part of it is, I suppose. What else did he say? The desire for something beyond.
He says, want acutely something that cannot be had in this world. I mean, he says a lot more about it in Mere Christianity, but he says, if I find it in myself in a desire which no experience in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is that I was made for another world.
Yes, I mean, the idea that because you want something, therefore it must be true, I find that a most extraordinary idea.
It does seem strange to want something that doesn't exist.
Why?
Because if we're trying to give an account of where this desire comes from, it seems to have to...
Well, hold on. So, I don't know if Lewis completely is being understood here, like what his real meaning is. If we could interview him and ask, what do you mean here? You mean when you were a child, you never had a moment where the love of your mother was satisfying? Where there was moments of satisfaction, peaks in your life where you felt the experience of something so profound and so comforting and at peace, and yes, that you wanted more, that you wanted but permanently, that you wanted but this world doesn't offer? That, to me, you have to have a taste of it, right? You have to at least have an experiential taste, and to know just a piece of that would be more like, I want more of that, but this world doesn't offer it. Yeah, it's an extension like what Dawkins saying. So it makes sense why we want to live forever, since we see everyone dies in our lives and we connect to them and it sucks to let go. Or you can name whatever other example it might be, as he brought up temperature earlier. You get a taste of what warmth feels like. Then you go and you live in the cold for a long time. You're gonna desire a permanent, nice, comfy, warm environment. But you had a taste of it. You don't really know what anything else is unless you've had a little bit of a taste of it. And just because you wish that there was a perfect world doesn't mean there is one.
Latch onto something. And it seems like what you're suggesting is that what it's latching onto is just the general desire to stay alive as long as possible.
Well, that I was thinking specifically of the desire for eternal life.
Sure.
But I think you can do a kind of version of that for whatever else C.S. Lewis was saying. Some people may have a sexual desire for a film star that they're never going to meet and wouldn't look at them if they did, and that doesn't mean that there's anything realistic about it. It's a natural extension of sexual desire.
Of course, the film star exists.
Well, it doesn't exist as
but C.S. Lewis hasn't really defined what that thing that he wants, if that exists. So, like, what is it? I don't know. I'm trying to make sense of this, because if Lewis is supposing something other than this world, something else beyond, if it doesn't exist, then why is he imagining it? That's not an argument that it does exist at all. It doesn't help make a strong case at all that it might exist. In my mind, I'm thinking to myself, huh? I could think of a world that, there is no cancer and death and disease and all of that. That doesn't mean that it actually exists, but I could take components of people who don't have it, who haven't died that way, and say, okay, and piece an imaginary world in which I wish it was that way.
Realistic sense as far as this wretched
Look, Alex is laughing, so he's probably just saying whatever. He's being the devil's advocate here.
person is concerned.
Sure.
I mean, you could talk about a desire for 72 virgins in Islamic heaven. That doesn't exist. But it's easy to see it as a projection of an ordinary biological desire.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree with you. Maybe if not in the detail, with the suggestion that the desire can be for something real, and that the image of God or afterlife or eternality are just sort of warped or extended versions of a real thing. That is, the afterlife is an extension of the desire to be alive.
I mean, a physicist might desire a solution to the theory of everything and the unification of gravity and quantum theory.
Yeah, that's what C.S. Lewis says. They desire God.
You desire a solution to a physical problem which may be insoluble.
I'm pulling your leg.
It may be out of this world in the sense that it's beyond solution. C.S. Lewis better come up with a better argument than that.
Well, C.S. Lewis has another argument for you, which is the argument from reason, and I actually want to give you a version of it that is more modern, that I'm sure you'll have talked about before, which is Alvin Plantinga's evolutionary argument against naturalism. I want to know what you think about this because, I'm sat with one of the most preeminent evolutionary biologists in living memory, and I would love to know what you think about this. Now, Plantinga points out that if we're a materialist, if we don't believe in the existence of a mind governing all of this, and everything evolves according to natural selection, well, what does natural selection select for? Survivability. Therefore, everything which evolves because it helps us to survive, including our minds, including our rationality. And so, why is it that we believe that evolution occurred by natural selection? Because we look at the evidence, and we use our rationality to come to the conclusion that natural selection is the best explanation. But what we're doing in assenting to the truth of natural selection is saying that the mechanism we use to believe in natural selection doesn't actually select for truth. It selects for survivability. We can't know that 2 + 2 = 4 is true, or if it's just that believing 2 + 2 = 4 is beneficial for our survival. If the latter is the case, then we run into a lot of trouble. And it seems that when we say evolution is true, therefore our brain evolved for survivability, we've just undermined the truth aptness of the very process that we've used to believe in evolution.
Yeah, I've never understood why people are at all persuaded by this. If any animal went through life, but particularly humans, went through life believing the equivalent of 2 + 2 doesn't equal 4, we would survive. I mean, if you base your life upon evidence, if you base your life upon rationality, you're more likely to survive than if you base your life upon nonsense. And it just seems to me to be so easy to say that rationality and the search for truth, the search for evidence is a good way to live, even from a mundane Darwinian point of view.
It's kind of reminds me of The Golden Bough by Sir James George Frazer, when he goes through the first, I don't know how long, in his massive volume of work on magic. And he points out there's 2 forms of magic, homeopathic and sympathetic. And one of them is like things that look alike and seem to behave or appear the same have connections, right? So yellow affects yellow. So he used an example of back when tribes would have babies born with jaundice in their eyes, they'd see the yellow. So they would get yellow leaves and yellow hair from the animals and yellow this and yellow that, and they'd make a stew and they'd try to mix it. And they believed that somehow the yellow had magical properties over the yellow in the eyes of children. And then you have this more, I believe it's homeopathic. Maybe it's sympathetic. I'm backwards. But one of them is that if they get in contact with something at some point in their life, they're always connected. So he uses an example in several. I mean, he goes through hundreds of a tribesman who goes to hunt for food. and his wife stays at home. There's this belief, though, that as he's setting up nets and traps to capture an animal for them to eat, his wife should not oil her hair and comb her hair with a brush with oil, because it is believed that he and her are connected, even no matter how far apart they get. And I'm getting somewhere with this, bear with me. But if that's the case, that they're connected, if she combs her hair with oil, her hair represents the net in a sense, and the oil is slippery. That animal will slip out of the trap. There are other things that happen. For example, if he gets bit by a serpent while he's out, they had this like superstition that she obviously was not faithful and cheated on him. They believed that if a serpent bit the man, that the wife was unfaithful at home. And there's a bunch of these kind of false pattern-seeking connections. He calls it a false science. That magic is a false science. But there's a rationale to it, even if it is a false rationale, which has led to deaths of many people. And then it's the primitive version of science. He points it out in the book that it is a proto-science, because eventually we realized that, he gives another example. Birds are pecking on this piece of wood. And the natives would go and grab that piece of wood, believing that if a bird was attracted to that one piece of wood, then when they go fishing using that rod for that piece of wood and put a string on the end of the stick, that the fish would then come after the bait that's attached to this piece of wood, because birds are. And this list goes on and on. Like, there are so many different kinds of examples where they connect the dots that weren't necessarily there. And eventually, someday, someone notices, hey, I didn't grab a tree that was poked by all these birds, and I caught more fish than you, and you grabbed the tree that was poked by the birds. So you start to realize and falsify these kind of magic, and you find out ways in which, oh no, it was actually the bait all along, or it was what time of the year, or whatever. We started to get better using our rationale along with our evolution to get closer to the truth. And it's unfortunate that this kind of argument constantly comes up. It's something that often happens with precepts, because if you can show that Christianity is false, rationally, logically, or give a very strong case as to why it's not true, they can just in the end go, ha, you lost. You used reason. You are justifying your arguments against the system that you have no justification to begin with, and therefore you have to accept a miracle just to even believe in any rationality. And if that's the case, fine. Just accept theism out the gate. Just say, I don't accept Christian theism if they need that to be the case. And just say, nope, I have a universal God that is beyond your Christian bullshit. And at the end of the day, it gives me the reason to realize why Christianity is false. That's it. It's the logos before your logos. Sorry for the long rant. It's necessary. This is a very important point. I really felt like I needed to get that out.
When you say a moment ago, if we were to live as if 2 + 2 didn't equal 4, I suppose what I'm saying is we have no way to ascertain whether it's actually true. I mean, you can. Are you saying something like, if the thing that we thought was true was not actually true, we just wouldn't be able to survive?
One comment. Sorry I paused it. This is such an important issue. Look at the population of humans before the Common Era. I looked it up. Since the beginning of Homo sapiens, as far as we can track, there's been only 10 million humans. The decay of their teeth, women with pregnancy, all the medical stuff that we didn't have. Like, there's so much that we would say is primitive and did not work for the sustainability, the long-term lifespans, etc. of human life, right? We get to a point around the time the Babylonians pop up, Mesopotamia, civilization's really cooking. We now get writing, right? So we start advancing on these things that we've already had language, but now we're writing. Now we're developing. Now we're finding civilization. Now we're taking it to a whole nother level. And so now we get to the Common Era, and then after the Common Era, we see the population of humanity far outweighs anything prior to this. We know that now we're doing math on a scale that we've never had. Education is widespread like we've never had. So many more advances in terms of rationale, logic, and reason and stuff that we've developed and learned over time that have helped us with survivability. I think that's a pretty common sense observation.
Or something like that.
Yes.
Is it not conceivable that there could be things that we believe that are not true, but by believing them to be true actually make us more likely?
Oh yes, that. I mean, there is some evidence for that. There's some evidence that having a somewhat inflated belief in your own ability is beneficial.
Right.
So there is evidence that people in general think they're better looking than they are, think they're cleverer than they are, think they're better drivers than they are, etc. And there could be a certain one at least could make an interesting case that self-deception of this kind. Robert Trivers, one of the great figures in my field, even wrote a book called The Folly of Fools about self-deception and the Darwinian advantage of self-deception. I think it's got to be pretty limited. I mean, it would be a little bit of an icing, a little bit of a gloss on top of a fundamentally rational.
I think that's the point that someone like Plantinga might wish to push back on, which is to say, how can we know that in some instances, sure, believing something that's actually false is beneficial for our survival, and so we've evolved like a mechanism to just naturally think that it's true. But that definitely doesn't happen when we do math. So that definitely doesn't happen when we're sort of doing empirical observation about, the shape and size of things. We know that doesn't happen. Well, how do we know that?
Well, we know that science works. I mean, we know that if you follow scientific principles, you can get to Pluto, and it works over and over and over again. You cure smallpox. You slingshot rockets around Venus and Earth and get to Jupiter.
This goes back to my false magic point about ancient, societies who believed they were doing a proto science. And sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. Oftentimes it's because you could flip a coin by chance that jaundice would go away or whatever it might be. But that false science eventually led to a more realistic science that is grounded in what Dawkins is describing right now.
All this works, and scientific predictions come out right. You can predict when eclipses will occur. It works.
I suppose the analogy there would be somebody would ask, well, then how do you know that 2 + 2 = 4 in the abstract mathematical realm is just true, rather than it being the case that thinking or acting as if 2 + 2 = 4 helps us get to the moon?
I think 2 + 2 = 4 is a different matter from getting to the moon. I mean, that's just logic.
Well, I suppose, mathematical truth and logic in general. Yes. I'm using 2 + 2 as a representative of that. Yeah.
Yes. I don't see the problem with that. I mean,
well, maybe there isn't. Maybe there is. I just wanted to get your thoughts, and I suppose I'll be interested to see what people make of your reply. One of the biggest reasons why people are religious, arguably, at least from a sort of cynical atheist perspective, is to escape the fear of death. Sigmund Freud said that there will be religion as long as we're afraid of death. Are you afraid of death?
I'm afraid of dying. I don't look forward to, getting cancer or something of that sort. I suppose I'm afraid of eternity. It is a daunting thought that the universe goes on and on and on and on and on and on for billions, for trillions of years. So I've said this often enough before that the escape from eternity would be the escape from any kind of pain, would be a general anesthetic, and which I think is what death is. So it's a nothingness, just like a general anesthetic. I like life, and I like to go on living. I enjoy life, and I'm curious to know how the future will unfold. So I would like to go on. So I wouldn't mind living for 200 years, but I wouldn't like to live for eternity.
No. What consolation might you offer to, say, somebody's read The God Delusion and they become convinced that God doesn't exist and there is no afterlife, and they feel pretty fine about that, except for this one thing, that they've now had to give up the idea that they're going to be able to escape death. And they say, well, I'm really happy for you, Professor Dawkins, that you're not afraid of death, but I still am. I'm afraid of the unknown. What advice would you give to them?
It's very hard to say. I'm under no obligation to give any consolation, of course.
Well, that's true.
I certainly think that the fact that a belief gives you consolation is no reason to think it's true. And what I care about is what's true. If they're not consoled by what I've just said about general anesthetics, I have to scratch my head and try to think of something else, but I find it a hard job to do that. I think that enjoy your life to the full while you've got it. You won't regret it when you're dead because you won't be there. So don't spoil your life by fretting about the fact that it's got to come to an end. Fill it with not selfish pleasures, but fill it with pleasure and pleasure for other people as well.
And perhaps its eternity would actually diminish its value in the sense that having $1 billion in the bank account makes $1 not worth very much. But if you've only got 10, then $1 sort of becomes everything to you.
Yes. Yes.
Well, Professor Richard Dawkins, thank you for your time. If you enjoyed that...
Wow, go subscribe to Alex O'Connor, man. He's always a great mind. I always enjoy listening from him, his thinking. I like what Dawkins said there. Very difficult. I mean, we're alive. We want to stay alive. There's also this part about where when it's over, it's over. That scares me sometimes. Like, I don't want the party to end, but it is going to. And how do you console someone who needs to believe, nope, I'm going to be alive forever after this? Like, how do you get them to see that? I don't know. What are your thoughts? What do you think about what was said today? Please comment down below. I want to see what you have to say. I'm watching. Thank you for being part of this community. Be sure to subscribe and check the bell so that you're notified every time we drop a reaction. If you don't check that bell and subscribe, they won't notify you about our reactions. Like the video and share it if you have any social medias out there. Again, this interaction helps YouTube grow our community here. And I just want to bring, me and more of what you guys have to recommend to react to. So thank you for the recommendations. I look forward to seeing more in the future. And until next time, see you then.